Thank you, Minister. And at the outset, can I formally welcome you and your delegation to Congress 2024. It is a long-standing tradition that the Minister for Education and senior officials of the department attend TUI Congress, and your attendance is very much appreciated. Over the past year, we have worked with each other in a variety of fora, and whilst we have not always agreed with each other, both sides acted in good faith, and that must be acknowledged. Minister, before I speak about the Irish education system and the role both the TUI and the department have played in it, I would like to reflect on the horrors that we are witnessing in Gaza. As an education union, our primary focus has been on the suffering of children and teachers throughout the region. Whether that be the horrific actions of Hamas on October 7th or the continued indiscriminate genocidal carnage inflicted on the Palestinian people by the Israeli Defence Forces ever since. It is utterly abhorrent when schools and hospitals have been targeted by the IDF. These are usually places of refuge and are now scenes of death and destruction. I think Irish people have been particularly shaken by the scale of the violence and disgusted by the perverse way the Israeli government are trying to spin it. Minister, I know that you will join us in its condemnation, and on behalf of Congress, I ask that you and your Cabinet colleagues redouble all your efforts to do everything in your power to secure immediate ceasefire, to get humanitarian aid into Gaza, and to assist in achieving a long-lasting peace in the region based on a stable, viable, two-state solution. Minister, one of the major impasses of the last year has been in relation to senior cycle. Completely avoidable conflict between the TUI and your department has exacerbated tensions around its efficacy of the new look senior cycle. It started with the proposal to have paper 1 in English and Irish brought forward to 5th year, despite the TUI, our colleagues in ASTI, our students as represented by the ISSU and the relevant subject associations INOTE and Angrisan expressing grave concerns about its educational validity. Thankfully, sense prevailed and credit must be given to you for reconsidering the proposal. But then we come to the suggestion of teacher-based assessments. Now, firstly, on behalf of the TUI, I absolutely welcome the decision to shelve teacher-based assessments. However, it would be remiss of me not to express our frustration that teachers still have to battle time and time again the idea of marking our own students for state certification purposes. The Leaving Cert, for all its faults, has one great strength, and that is the anonymity for both the learner and the marker. We have consistently made clear in all fora over a number of years that any attempt to move to teacher-based assessments would not only be regressive educationally, but would also forever damage the relationship between student and teacher in our classrooms and ultimately undermine the very thing that underpins the Leaving Certificate's deserved reputation for excellence: public trust. You stated that your decision was down to AI and its possible effects on education. We welcome your prudence in this regard, as both necessary and timely. I don't doubt for a minute the power of AI, especially generative AI. I have seen it in action and it is all very impressive. It is undoubtedly something that we will have to assess and address on a continuing basis. However, Minister, I also don't doubt the power of tens of thousands of teachers who strenuously object to the idea, and had AI not emerged as an issue, moving to teacher-based assessments would still be a terrible idea. That is why it is extremely disappointing that you claim AI to be the sole reason for your announcement, and that teachers' professional views didn't figure at all into your decision. So let me be clear. Regardless of whatever conclusions are drawn from the SEC research on AI, the TUI are unwavering on this issue. We will not mark our own students for the Leaving Cert. It is important to state that we are not against change or good, new, innovative ideas, but we are against change for change's sake. Moreover, even good change must be resourced to be good. We have recently seen the creation of 2 new subjects: drama, film and theatre studies, and climate action and sustainable development. Both have the potential to enhance the student experience and to foster creativity, collaborative action, critical thinking, social awareness, empathy and global citizenship. They have the potential to enrich the senior cycle. But there are critical questions that remain unanswered. Who is deemed qualified to teach these new subjects? How will they be assessed? What kind of resources will be available for the new subjects? How will equitable access be assured so that the new subjects do not become just yet another preserve of the privileged? Barring the recent and welcome announcements of increased allocation to schools who take on these new subjects, we are in the dark. This lack of information, paralleled with the acceleration of senior cycle, is extremely concerning. The TUI is proud to be a union full of committed educationalists. We believe in the principles of high-quality education for all and have engaged at every opportunity we could to help devise a successful senior cycle programme. However, it is regrettable and worrying that the practitioner's voice is often seen as an unwelcome one. It is often forgotten that we are the experts. Teachers know what will work and what won't work in our classrooms. We are not some idle bystanders to be just brushed aside. Only recently at your senior cycle event in Croke Park, Minister, you addressed school leaders. The SEC did. The NCCA did. The Inspectorate did. The students did. Guess which stakeholder was not asked to voice their opinion? Teachers. I am glad to hear today that there will be further conferences and subject meetings, and hopefully our voice can be raised there. We have a proven track record when it comes to educational reform. The removal of ring fencing for LCA and the development of new senior cycle programme for L2LP students are all TUI ideas. Any meaningful reform needs to engage teachers. Their voice, your voice, delegates, as articulated by the TUI, needs to be paramount if we are to have any progress in the Irish education sector. Teachers are aware of the pitfalls and opportunities that a new course presents. They know more than anyone what should be enhanced and what shouldn't, what should be embraced and what shouldn't, what should be encouraged and what shouldn't. Quite frankly, Minister, ad hoc announcements without any consultation with the TUI not only inhibit senior cycle redevelopment, but it is disrespectful to the teachers who are going to be delivering it. However, more recently, I must acknowledge a more inclusive approach is being shown by you and your department. And the TUI did get a chance to make a presentation on our views and concerns to the Senior Cycle Redevelopment Board. Whilst I suspect you do not agree with everything that we have presented, it is important that you hear it. And on foot of that presentation made by the TUI, I must welcome the further announcements made by you, Minister, on specification scaffolding, which was something of great concern to teachers, on sample papers and marking schemes being available before the introduction of senior cycle, on CPD being provided for teachers before the implementation of senior cycle, and the increased allocation for schools taking on new subjects. These are the type of announcements and this is the type of information that teachers and schools need to hear. One of the biggest unanswered questions is that of resourcing, Minister. We are continually compared to Finland, perceived as the paragon of educational virtues. Yet rarely is there a comparison between how the Finnish government resources education and how the Irish government resources education. Finland invests just under 7% of GDP into education each year. Minister, we don't even do half that, and less than 1% goes to post-primary education. And despite this chronic underfunding, Ireland continually punches well above its weight in all international metrics because of the quality of its teachers. The recent PISA scores confirmed that the department is getting remarkably good bang for its buck. If the aspirations of the new senior cycle are to be truly achieved, and we are to create a system that values students of all abilities and fosters all the talents and skills they possess, not just the academic ones, then teachers need time to prepare and deliver it. This is what we expect to hear from you, Minister, because regardless of anyone's lofty ambitions, reality will always win the day. Our pupil-teacher ratio is far too high, and teachers' class contact time is far too long. Delivering a specification with new resources, through new methodologies, to the high standards we are accustomed to, is not possible when you have 30 students in an inclusive classroom. Perhaps we do need to follow our Finnish brethren and radically reduce class sizes and teachers' timetables. 40 minutes professional time was granted to teachers to resource the reform of junior cycle. It is only logical that extensive change at senior cycle will need far more than that to have any chance of success. Appropriate and generous resourcing is essential for successful redevelopment at senior cycle. Adequate funding must be provided for all schools, big or small, urban or rural. Equality and equity need to be at the centre of this. If you decide to follow the path of previous pilot subjects, we could end up in a situation where the new bright and shiny school that volunteer for these programmes get all the new resources and the rest of the country is left with nothing. It has not gone unnoticed that many schools were volunteered into previous networks by school management without any meaningful consultation with staff. That is not a sustainable option. There is a great irony in that we are now embarking on a study into AI, when in my own school it takes 40 minutes to turn on a computer. Minister, schools are already at the pin of their collar and teachers are already overburdened with workload. Such seismic change cannot be done on the cheap. Speaking of workload, Minister, what is currently happening in schools is completely unsustainable. The Union has abundant evidence from up and down the country of overburdened teachers, including principal teachers, and rising rates of burnout. In any given school, a teacher has to develop schemes of work, literacy plans, numeracy plans, teaching and learning plans, differentiation plans, lesson plans, department plans, SEN plans, CBAs, formative assessment plans, summative assessment plans, digital plans, self-school evaluation plans, extracurricular activities, retention plans, attainment plans, JCT, NCCA, UDL plans, attendance plans, community plans, behavioural plans, pastoral care plans, DESH plans, inclusion plans, student support plans. And we haven't even entered the classroom yet, Minister. Is there any wonder we have a recruitment and retention crisis? We cannot keep making the profession unattractive by adding swathes of needless bureaucracy and paperwork. We cannot continue to have our members, teachers, including our principal teachers, at high and increasing risk for health issues due to work overload in the education sector. We cannot keep tearing teachers away from their primary goal, teaching. This is why, Minister, there also must be a restoration of posts and responsibility to 2009 pre-austerity levels. Indeed, this is a requirement under the agreement freely entered into by your department with the TUI in September 2016. All additions have been welcomed by the TUI, and in particular the 500 AP2 posts announced in the budget and recently confirmed by you and your department that schools can start filling these posts immediately after Easter for commencement in September. However, full restoration means full restoration. A house minus a roof is not restored. Minister, schools cannot keep working on a piecemeal basis. The percentage of teachers with posts of responsibility is currently far below the 52% mark of 2009. The TUI had warned previously of the foolishness of creating additional deputy principal positions as opposed to restoring AP1 and AP2 posts. The chance to distribute leadership among staff, delegate responsibilities and boost morale in schools was unfortunately thrown away. Now our concerns for an unsustainable workload have come to fruition. If our collective aim is to have the best educational system available that looks after both the educational and pastoral needs for our students, then urgent action is needed. I welcome the announcement for the Irish upskilling course. I would suggest, however, restoring teaching through Irish allowance, which was cut during the austerity agenda, would be far more prudent and beneficial. I also note and welcome your announcement of funding to enhance services for well-being. That is very important. But the fact remains, prior to the last recession, we already had fully comprehensive pastoral supports, but these posts of responsibility were irresponsibly dismantled. The TUI will be watching the next budget with very keen interest. We will judge your commitment to our schools, our teachers and our students by your practical commitment to the restoration of posts of responsibility. 15 years on from the appalling damage of the FEMPI era austerity moratorium, and 8 years on from your department's commitment to make good the damage, this is not an unreasonable basis for judgment. Minister, I must give great credit to you for your announcement of free second-level books for junior cycle. When you examine the cost of it, it's a wonder how no previous minister did this before. But they didn't. You did. And as a union that represents a large cohort of schools from lower socio-economic backgrounds, I applaud this measure. This will have a real impact on the lives of families who are struggling in the current financial climate. That being said, the TUI does have a lot of concerns and questions about how this is to be implemented on a practical level. The administration of this new scheme will be colossal. Adequate funding must be provided for it to work smoothly. It cannot just land on principals and teachers to just find a way to resolve it. I do acknowledge your announcements, but there are increasing reports from schools who feel they cannot take on this extra burden as they grapple with the procurement process. So I ask you, Minister, to aid every school as much as you can to avoid the increasing of an already onerous workload and to ensure this scheme becomes a reality. Minister, some of our most vulnerable students are those with special or additional educational needs. The TUI has and will continue to be a voice for these students. For example, we absolutely see the benefit of the summer provision programme. These students need it. However, we cannot understand why some of these students who would be more suited to home-based summer provision are being pushed in the direction of only in-school summer provision. This action doesn't recognise the bespoke needs for students or the benefits that one-to-one home-based provision can have on their lives. Students and their parents shouldn't be forced to choose one or the other. The question should be asked, what suits these students best? Ireland has a shameful history when it comes to students with complex needs. No impediment should deny a student or a school of the proper resources in this regard. Our schools need the proper allocation to allow them to adequately meet the needs of students with additional educational needs, including those with complex needs. Every child deserves to be educated to the best of the state's capability. Nothing, and I mean nothing, no reason, no condition, no obstacle should prevent students from getting the vital AEN supports that they so urgently require for a fulfilling education. Minister, the TUI, as you know, has been outspoken and warned many times on why we will and have a recruitment and retention crisis in education. More importantly, we have consistently offered solutions to the crisis. Whilst we recognise the €2,000 refund for second-year PME students, as any financial help is greatly appreciated, the 2-year PME still completely prices out anyone who might want to return to education or embark on a career change. Saving up to do a 1-year course might be possible for some, but 2 years is an absolute impossibility for most. There is a cyclical problem occurring in education. We have a 2-year PME programme. We have a teacher recruitment crisis. So in order to fill the gaps and keep any school in any way operational, these second-year PME students are being asked to sub again and again and again. Some of these students even have their own timetables, Minister. Halving the duration of the PME would release approximately 1,400 teachers into the system. I would like to quote a former teacher and someone you know well, the Taoiseach, Micheál Martin, who said, "If you're working class or your income is limited to what your family can do, the idea of a master's in teaching will be a daunting financial prospect. I think we should be alive to revisiting all that. Pure educationalists might say we need 2 years, but I'm not convinced. I do think we perhaps have to look at, particularly at the post-primary level, that master's process and the 2-year timeline and whether we can shorten that." I couldn't agree more with the Taoiseach. I am one of the lucky ones. I was part of one of the last years that completed their training in 1 year. A lot of the people in this room did it in 1 year. Minister, you probably did it in 1 year. As teachers, we are just as capable as those who did a 2-year course. The second year is... The second year is not an educational panacea. It looks more like a vanity project for the Teaching Council. Minister, I've raised the issue of giving incremental credit for teaching service in non-EU countries with you directly. And it has also repeatedly come up in the Teachers' Conciliation Council. We were told this had gone to deeper for consideration, and after months of querying for updates, we later found out that this had not actually happened. Now, despite how you square that circle, there is still no reason why the Department of Education cannot seek approval now for such a scheme. We have just shy of 4,000 qualified teachers in places like Dubai. They are offered benefits that the Irish state just cannot compete with. Tax-free salaries, houses, food allowances, the list goes on. However, what we can do is ensure that someone who has, say, 10 years teaching experience is not impoverished on their return to Ireland, They will not come home if they have to start at the bottom of the pay scale. To put it simply, we need teachers. We have an abundance of them abroad who trained and qualified in Ireland, yet we are doing nothing to make the thought of coming home remotely attractive. This crisis will become an utter catastrophe unless serious action is taken. I have wasted many hours of my life at a series of depressing teacher supply meetings convened by the department, where it is very evident, if it costs money, your officials don't want to know about it. Let's not forget the failure of the shared teacher scheme, which resulted in the appointment of one permanent teacher. The lack of action from the department has been outrageous and has resulted in all the engagements achieving very little and ultimately wasting everybody's time. Speaking of waste of time, let's talk about Croke Park hours. Minister, I have had some bad days in work, but nothing quite drains the soul as when your principal introduces some unknown guest speaker to talk to you about something that has no professional or personal relevance whatsoever. Minister, teachers are tired. We're tired of the pointlessness of these meetings. We're tired of the box-ticking culture that feeds off these hours. Teachers are naturally volunteers. We go way beyond the call of duty, week in, week out. Governments need to understand that a lot of the extra work isn't tangible and it doesn't generate a piece of data. You can't readily document the morale boost to students who get a start for the school team. You can't write down on a spreadsheet the impact of coming in early to make sure a student is fed. You can't expect teachers and principals to operate as if they work in large corporations, because they don't. These Croke Park hours are sapping away volunteerism from schools. Every minute where teachers are resentfully bored to tears erodes goodwill and loses hours of voluntary input into schools and communities. Schools can't be kept in austerity mode forever. These hours were brought in when the country was in freefall. Yet for some misconceived reason, teachers remain tied to what would cost the government nothing to remove. In the name of well-being for both teachers and students, I ask you, Minister, do what no other minister has done before. Remove these hours and put the joy back into teaching. Minister, even though I've been teaching for over 10 years, I'm technically a new entrant. A concept as farcical as the two-tier pay system itself. I started teaching in 2012, the year of the worst pay discrimination in our profession. Salaries for starting in the profession were cut by a third and morale was on the floor. As a result of over a decade of campaigning by the TUI, including strike action in February 2020, we have done all the hard work to right this wrong. It was teachers standing together in solidarity, giving up a 1% pay rise in the teeth of a cost of living crisis so that their peers and colleagues could receive the value of the PME allowance, so that they could be finally viewed as equals. That's what teachers did for each other and the wider education system. Minister, I ask, what will you and your department now do for us? Other discriminations. Other discriminations and disincentives, however, are still in place since 2011, which have made teaching an inhospitable terrain for potential recruits. There is a very significant cost associated with the 2-year PME, the withholding of incremental recognition for the lengthy period of unpaid training, and the abolition of a wide range of allowances. This has resulted in a huge opportunity cost in potential earnings. We are only now emerging from a lost decade in education caused primarily by pay discrimination. Imagine if teachers hadn't sacrificed their own money to balance their fellow teachers' pay. If teachers had cared as little as government seemed to care, where the recruitment and retention crisis would be by now. To top it all off, Minister, those who have entered the profession since 2013 have had imposed on them an eviscerated pension regime that is much inferior to that of their colleagues. The new career averaging pension scheme affects teachers very acutely, as teachers have the longest pay scale in the public sector and arguably the most miserly promotional opportunities. We can't keep denigrating and impoverishing the profession if we want to retain the teachers we have and if we want to attract others to it. So I ask again, what will our Department of Education do for us? There's also a bitter irony that in order for a pension to allow you retire with any dignity, you need to own your own home. Excessive rents mean a sole pension is in no way sufficient for any comfortable standard of life after a well-earned career. Minister, on behalf of every member of the TUI, and I am not exaggerating when I say this, the abject failure of this government and successive previous governments to tackle the housing crisis is one of the great disgraces in the history of the state. Feeble efforts have only exacerbated the problem beyond any previous comprehension. Countless workers, including teachers, have had their whole livelihood stripped from them because of crazed policies based on pure profiteering, which have broken the social contract almost beyond repair. To conclude, Minister, the TUI is proud of its educational values. It is proud of its social values, including the core principle of equity in and through education. We are a progressive union. We are a union that comes with solutions to problems, but we are a union with high standards, and we make no apology for calling out what we see as unjust, unequal, or utterly illogical. Ultimately, we share a common goal of making an education sector that benefits students of all abilities, regardless of background. An education sector where teachers, as the expert practitioners, are respected, heard and valued. An education sector that has the resources and capabilities to thrive into the future. Minister, if you are willing to work to that end, then we are more than willing to work with you. Thank you.